So here's the thing, when it came to finally planning which shows I was going to see on my upcoming New York trip, I found myself actually saying the words, what if 2 weeks just isn't enough time? And I said that not because of all the shows I wanted to see on Broadway, but because of the wealth of exciting new productions opening off-Broadway. Oh my god, hey, welcome back to my theatre-themed YouTube channel, or hello to those of you listening on podcast platforms. My name is Mickey Joe, and I am obsessed with all things theatre. I am, as many of you will already know at this point, a professional theatre critic and a content creator and an enthusiast based here in the UK, but who travels frequently to New York to go and see as many Broadway and off-Broadway shows as possible. I try and see pretty much everything worth seeing, but ultimately, and try as I might, the Atlantic Ocean does remain something of an obstacle to me, and so when I get to travel to New York 3 or 4 times a year, I have to choose which shows I'm going to go and see. Not only that, but which shows I'm going to go and cover and review for everybody following on social media, which is a great reminder for you to make sure you're following me with the notifications turned on so you don't miss my upcoming New York content and reviews. Some very exciting shows on the roster, let me tell you. In fact, literally, let me tell you, because that's what I'm doing right now. And I dare say those of you who don't live in New York and who are used to visiting or visiting London for theatre perhaps, are used to the sensation of trying to figure out what you can see in a finite amount of time. So today, with so many new productions opening, many of which I have not yet seen, I'm going to give you a sense of my perspective on the fall season by way of the shows that I have chosen to see for myself, which is a combination of the things which I think are the most buzzy, the most exciting, and the things which I think will actually be the best theatre. As always, we are going to do this under 3 different headings. I will tell you the shows that I am definitely seeing / have already booked, the shows that I am hoping to see or will maybe see, which is already a longer list than slots I have left to see shows, so they're not all going to make the cut, and perhaps the even more intriguing shows that I am not planning to see specifically. As always, I would love to hear your thoughts in the comments section down below. Let me know which of the shows on my roster you're most excited to hear my thoughts about. Let me know any shows that I might have missed that you would like to bring to my attention, or just let us know the shows that you are most excited to see in New York over the next couple of months. In the meantime, start spreading the news. I am leaving today. Well, I'm leaving in 48 hours at the time of filming, but let me tell you all about the shows that I will be seeing or not on my upcoming trip to Broadway. Okie dokie, let's start with the positives and let me tell you what I am definitely going to be seeing. Starting with the reason for the season, although the season is actually its old title, I am talking about the Broadway opening of Two Strangers Carry a Cake Across New York. I am so excited to get to see this in New York, not because I haven't already seen the show, both off West End, in the West End, and regionally in the US when it was produced a couple of months ago at the American Repertory Theatre in Massachusetts, but because New York audiences en masse haven't yet had the opportunity to see this show. It has not yet been produced in Manhattan. It's set there. It is in many ways a love letter to the city. I'm so excited to see this with an audience full of New Yorkers. I think that is deliciously exciting. Unless, of course, it's an audience full of other people like myself who are all hoping to be surrounded by New Yorkers, and none of us are. Hopefully that's not the case. But I am very excited for this new British musical that has made its way to Manhattan in the slipstream of shows like Operation Mincemeat, which conjures many of the same feel-good, romantic, intimate, small vibes of the successful Tony Award-winning musical Maybe Happy Ending. And I call it the reason for the season because this is why we are going to New York when we are. This is why the trip is timed as such. It also happens to overlap with a couple of other openings, including the one which I think all of you are going to be the most excited for me to cover. Of all the reviews I will be sharing after my trip, I think this is going to get the most views, and that is the revival of Chess. And I may be on nobody's side, but I will be in the auditorium for one of the upcoming performances of Chess at the Imperial Theatre. I am so excited to hear this score sung by this fantastic company. I am very intrigued to experience the new book, the reworked version. It has been decades since Chess was last seen on Broadway. I couldn't miss it. I had to be there for this one. And I am very excited to be going there in an official critical capacity. So this is one of those shows that you are going to see a full YouTube review from me about, which is very exciting. And revivals seem to be very much the thing on Broadway right now, because another reason that my stagey fiancé Erin James are going at the time that we are is to go and see Ragtime at Lincoln Center. Now, we've technically seen the majority of this company and essentially the earlier iteration of this production when it was staged at New York City Center, but I'm never going to pass up the opportunity to go and see Ragtime. It is one of my favorite musicals of all time. I think it's one of the greatest book musicals ever ever written. I think the score is phenomenal, the book is phenomenal, and it's an extraordinary company that they have assembled. So even though I have essentially seen this version of the show, I know that it's a different staging, there's some changes, I know it's not a full set, and it might not be the open brackets wheels of a closed brackets dream production of Ragtime that we had been hoping for with full lush staging. It's still going to be a real treat to hear this score sung by these wonderful performers. So there was no way that I was going to be in New York at the same time as Ragtime and not attempt to go and see it. At one point, there were fears that the Magicians Union, not the Magicians Union, excuse me. The Musicians Union at one point seemed poised to go on strike, so did Actors' Equity, and in the eventuality that the actors didn't and the musicians did, Ragtime would have been one of a very small number of shows still running through that strike period, so I was briefly considering keeping the flights and just going to see Ragtime 20 times in 2 weeks. Don't put it past me, I'd do it. Carrying on, here is another of the shows that I have been desperate to get to New York for because there has been so much buzz and enthusiasm around it. It is not a revival in the most traditional sense, but it is a remounting of an iconic musical from the past. This is Masquerade, the off-Broadway immersive production of Phantom of the Opera. I am so excited. I have booked my tickets. They were not inexpensive, but it's also incredibly well sold. So was Ragtime for that matter. Kudos to them. And there was no way that I was missing out. I'm not going to be in New York and not get to go and do Masquerade. I have heard the most exhilarating things. I still at this point have heard very few spoilers, and I would love to get to make a video about it and talk to you all about it on here. There's also a dress code, and in the last few hours I did go and buy myself a brand new suit exclusively for Masquerade. That's how much I'm looking forward to it. Now, I mentioned New York City Center already. I am heading back there to see another one of their shows, their annual gala presentation performance of Bat Boy. Not a show that I'm familiar with, but friends of mine are hugely enthusiastic about the material. I am a fan of the writers. It's one of my sort of musical theatre black holes that needs to be rectified, and it sounds like this is a great cast and a great production with which to do that. There have also been some updates, some alterations, I think, to the material, so I'm really excited to go and see Bat Boy. Finally, we've sort of been staying in the realm of musicals. I'm also going to be returning to an off-Broadway show that I just loved earlier in the year. It has transferred to a different off-Broadway house. I am talking about Beau. And if you have any New York trips coming up, I urge you to consider going to see Beau. It is a lovely, queer, atmospheric gig theatre, one-act musical starring the brilliant Matt Rodin, absolute rock star of a human being, in a production giving you the vibes from Once, because the whole playing space is transformed into this sort of atmospheric, immersive bar. It's a story being told through a gig, like I said. And the reason I urge you to go and see it is not just because it's fantastic and Matt is really great in it, and the music is great, and it's really moving, but also because they have some unusual showtimes. We love unusual showtimes. They have some 5 p.m. shows. They have some 9:30 p.m. shows. You can absolutely go and see a one-act Broadway play at 7 p.m. and then go and make it to Beau, which is right down in Midtown Manhattan in the middle of the theatre district, a stone's throw from most of those Broadway theatres, or you can see their 5 p.m. show and then go see a 7 p.m. or an 8 p.m. afterwards. In other words, you have no excuse not to go and see Beau, and I charge you to do so. I haven't yet had the chance to really review it because I saw a preview performance last time, but I will do this time around. Now let's talk about the plays, and one of my most anticipated is the Broadway transfer of Liberation. I have heard such great things about this from everyone I knew who saw it off-Broadway. I am very excited to see the Broadway arrival. This is being talked about right now as one of the shining lights in a perhaps slightly dim start to the Broadway season, controversially. But I dare say there is another on its way, because the West End hit production of Oedipus, starring Mark Strong and Leslie Manville, directed and adapted by the visionary Robert Icke, is about to open at Studio 54. It's already in previews, and it has its official opening night during my trip. And I am very excited to be making a return trip to that play. I saw one of its final performances in London, which is much of the reason why I didn't ever review it on here, even though I had hoped to. Erin is going to get the chance to see it for the first time as well, which is super super exciting. I'm going to be very intrigued to watch him watching the play. And it's another one where it's going to be really satisfying to witness an audience discovering that piece of theatre for the first time. I hope this becomes a real hot ticket in New York. I think it absolutely deserves to. And it's nice to be able to support a couple of, to some extent, homegrown British productions thriving over in Manhattan. Then we have some off-Broadway plays that I'm very much looking forward to. We're going to see This World of Tomorrow, which I believe is at the Shed, starring Tom Hanks, little-known actor, and Kelly O'Hara. I believe she does musicals. I'm joking, of course. They're both very significant. I know astoundingly little about this play. I gather there may be some kind of time travel involved, and I'm sort of keeping myself as unaware of it as possible so that I can go in and have this very fresh experience. For anyone curious about getting tickets to this play, I know they were initially very expensive. They have subsequently lowered the prices of some of them, so go and take a look if you hadn't recently. And I say lowered the prices, it's still New York theatre, so your eyes may water just a little bit, but sometimes less crazily expensive is the best that we can hope for. Another play that I'm seeing is at the MCC Theatre. It's called Caroline. I've heard great things about this as well, terrific word of mouth. I'm seeing it in its final week of performances, but I'm still going to let you know what I think of it. I have been really eager to go and see a Preston Max Allen play because I've heard great things about his writing, and this one is about a young trans character and trans themes, and that's a piece of theatre that I definitely want to go and support and experience and talk about because I think it's really important in the current social and political climate. We need more trans representation on stage, especially through the voice of trans writers. That's maybe the most important thing. Finally, I am heading to the Public Theatre for only the second time in my life. The first was earlier this year to go and see Initiative. I was so delighted to be invited to this play that I knew absolutely nothing about, and the first thing that I noticed was it has a runtime of 5 hours with multiple intermissions. The synopsis talks about multiple friends coming of age and this sort of epic of youth. The title is Initiative, and there is a D20 in the artwork design, so I'm getting big D&D vibes from this, Dungeons & Dragons, for those of you not in the know, which I am more than a little bit partial to. And my inclination is that for the Public Theatre, in all of its prestige, to platform and produce this 5-hour-long piece of theatre and sort of give it enough of a stamp of approval to be like, yes, this merits a 5-hour runtime, that means I think it's going to be pretty exciting and perhaps more than a little bit epic. And I like a theatrical marathon now and then. It's been a while since I've seen a 5-hour show. So now we arrive at the maybes, beginning with one that I think is almost definitely going to become a yes, but it's just not yet 100% confirmed, and that is The Queen of Versailles. Now, any reluctance that I have around going to see this show is not just because the press team seem to really specifically not want me to, but, you know, more on that at another time, or possibly never. It's also because I'm not hearing the most thrilling word of mouth, and because Sherry Renee Scott is standing by for Kristin Chenoweth. I would love to see Kristin Chenoweth in a full Broadway show, but I'm also a huge fan of Sherry Renee Scott. And if we headed back in January and caught one of her scheduled performances, that would mean I would have seen the show twice. And if it's one I'm not that enthusiastic about in the first place, am I going to want to see it twice? These sometimes are the difficult decisions that you have to make. It's like Sophie's Choice, but for gay men. Then we have one that, again, I'm almost definitely going to go and see. I just haven't booked tickets or really picked out a date yet, and that is Hadestown at the Walter Kerr Theatre. Don't at me, I know I have seen Hadestown dozens of times at this point, maybe even a dozen times, but Jack Wolf, the supreme talent of the West End, is currently starring as Orpheus in the Broadway production, and I will be damned if I am going to miss it. I've already told him that I was going to come and see it in November, so I can't not now. I also hear, for what it's worth, that the entire principal cast of Hadestown right now is really strong, and it's a great time to go back and see the show. Here's one that we are almost definitely going to go and see because this is one of Aaron's most anticipated shows, and that is, I'm going to get the number wrong, is it the 25th annual Putnam County Spelling Bee? 25 sounds right. 20th annual? It's Spelling Bee. We're going to go and see Spelling Bee off-Broadway, which, believe it or not, I have never seen. And I've never really had the chance to see a professional production of Spelling Bee because it is not done very frequently at all here in the UK. There is occasionally a youth or amateur production happening at the Edinburgh Fringe, but I think the last time it was produced professionally was the UK premiere in the very early 2010s at the Donmar Warehouse, directed, if you can believe it, by Jamie Lloyd. No, it did not have black underwear and blood and cameras. It was a quite significant step away from his current aesthetic. The off-Broadway cast cast is also fantastic, and I think some people still get to go on stage and be guest spellers. I'd love to be a guest speller. I happen to consider myself quite good at spelling, which does sort of sound, now I say it out loud, like famous last words. Watch me be absolutely horrible. Watch me misspell like Broadway or theatre. Actually, we disagree, America and I, about how to spell theatre, so that may indeed be my undoing. Then we have, and this is the one I'm really tearing my hair out about, Rob Lake Magic with the Muppets. And as I have said before, as you may know, I love the Muppets. I have such extraordinary love for the Muppets, and I am irrationally fearful of magicians. I am. I have this fear of magicians and mentalists since childhood, and I deliberately avoid those kinds of shows. For what it's worth, I don't think that Rob Lake is the kind of a magician who is going to scare me as much as like the Derren Browns of this world, who is a very nice man who I have met but still scares the bejesus out of me. And I don't know that I have it in me to pass up the opportunity to see the Muppets live on stage, but I've also heard that their involvement in the show is incredibly limited, which we knew beforehand, which isn't coming as much of a surprise. But realistically, I know a lot of people, I mean everyone I know who is interested in going to see this show just wants to see the Muppets. On the one hand, this could be a really great and chill final night show to see in New York after a busy couple of weeks. On the other hand, I don't want that to be an anticlimax. We have on a couple of occasions before finished with the most disappointing show of the entire trip, and it's not a great way to end the journey. Now, there's also the Broadway return of Beetlejuice, and I have wanted to see Beetlejuice for years, as I know many other UK theatregoers have. And it was incredibly welcome news when it was recently announced that Beetlejuice would finally be heading to the UK, with a West End home officially announced, the Prince Edward Theatre, in May 2026. And that's a little part of why I'm not sure whether I need to see it in New York. You know, it is finally London bound, and do I want that London production to be my first experience of the show, rather than what is essentially a North American tour stop? At the same time, will I do a better job of reviewing the London production if I've already to some extent familiarised myself with the material by seeing it at the Palace Theatre on Broadway? I'd love to go back to the Palace. It's a great theatre to get to experience. The renovation that they've done is really stunning. I am also going to coincide with Trisha Paytas's limited run in the show. Is that something that I need to talk about on social media? Will the people of YouTube be so intrigued? Would that be a good idea for me professionally? I don't know. A Broadway show that I do want to catch is Art, with James Corden, Neil Patrick Harris and Bobby Cannavale. I am hearing great things. I will almost definitely try and catch that one. It's a play that I've wanted to see for a really long time. Waiting for Godot, I shared a couple of weeks ago that I was trying to make up my mind about by reading all of the Broadway reviews, and I'm still not entirely sure because I think my enjoyment of it is still going to be measured, but I'm not necessarily as apprehensive about the notion of going to see it as I was before I read the reviews, even if many of them were a little bit lukewarm about the production. I think they left me more intrigued than anything else. I've just recently become aware of an off-Broadway musical called Reunions with a really stellar cast, including Chip Zien. I need to learn a little bit more about the show. It seems a little bit slight, but also charming, and sometimes that's a great companion with, an otherwise very heavy and impactful week of theatre. Not everything needs to punch you in the gut, otherwise you're going to end up sort of culturally bruised. Speaking of which, Prince F. Forgive me for not using the full title. This has been an acclaimed off-Broadway hit. It was running when we were last in the city. Why we didn't see it then, I do not know, but it has since transferred to Studio Seaview, where it is all but sold out. If I get the chance to get tickets, a lot of people are telling me that it's unmissable, that I really have to see it. Another part of my brain wonders, if it's selling this well, is it going to have some kind of a future life? Is a Broadway transfer in its future, maybe even this season? Well, I regret desperately trying to see it off Broadway if I'm going to have more opportunities to in the future, like I did with O'Mary. And then finally, we get a show called Oratorio for Living Things at the Signature Theatre, written by Heather Christian, whose work I have enjoyed previously. I think this is a sort of a non-narrative piece, is what my expectation of this is. It's described here as a music theatre piece, a classical oratorio with a captivating blend of blues, gospel, jazz, and soul, both otherworldly and achingly intimate. This immersive event delves into the intricacies of human memory alongside the powerful forces that shape the universe. I have heard such strong recommendations for this show, but occasionally from people whose taste I know is very different to my own. And in spite of the fact that I'm utterly convinced that this is a really great piece of theatre, I just don't know if it's going to be for me. So I'm sort of sitting with that one and making up my mind about it. And again, I think it's selling quite well. So I don't actually have that much time. And like I said at the start, I don't even have the space for all of these shows. I'm going to have to make some difficult decisions. Finally then, and this may be a point of intrigue for you, here are the shows that for one reason or another, I am not going to see. Now, only some of these are shows that I am explicitly avoiding on principle, others are difficult decisions that I have already made, so not every show included in this particular section is there as a slight, although some of them are. We'll start with an obvious one. I will not be going to see Harry Potter and the Cursed Child on Broadway, even though film star Tom Felton is going into the show, reprising his screen performance as Draco Malfoy in what can only be described as something of a loser move. And I have made it, I hope, abundantly clear in the past why I don't want to support Harry Potter and the Cursed Child. It's to do with the royalties from the show going to its original creator J.K. Rowling and helping to finance her perpetual, needless, hateful crusade against the LGBTQ+ community. Initially, it seemed simply to be aimed towards the trans community, but she also had random and totally unnecessary beef with asexual people not too long ago as well. So in spite of the star casting, which I can only hope spells the beginning of the end for this production on Broadway, I will not be going to see it. Wingardium Levioso, absolutely not. Similarly, the other one that I'm sort of boycotting, and I said not too long ago there were two shows that I refuse to see on Broadway, this is the other one, is the new arrival Little Bear Ridge Road. I'm pretty sure I got all the words in the right order this time in the title. I've been calling it Little Bear on the Prairie, all sorts of things. Also, every time I put it in my notes app in any kind of a list, it thinks it's an address. And truthfully, I would rather go to wherever that is than support a production being produced on Broadway by Scott Rudin. Not that I don't think people can change, and I've talked about this at length in a far more nuanced way if you want to hear my full thoughts on this production coming to Broadway and the Broadway return of ousted bully producer Scott Rudin, who by all accounts ought to have faced criminal charges for the accusations made against him rather than some quiet time in his very expensive property. I also didn't love Clarkston by the same playwright Samuel D. Hunter in the West End. I have seen Laurie Metcalf on stage before, I would like to again, but I am quite disappointed that everyone involved in the production is, choosing to do so in creative collaboration with producer Scott Rudin. A lot about this situation disappoints me, and I just don't think it's responsible from anyone involved. Even on principle, I just don't like what this says about bullies in the industry and their ability to return after a timeout. Now, the rest of the shows on this list I have no personal grudge against, necessarily. Maybe this next one just a little bit. I know fairly little about this show. What I do know and what I am hearing I'm not loving. This is the polarizing off-Broadway musical with a sizable cult social media following. It is called Slam Frank, and it takes aim, I think, simultaneously at fascism and left-wing identity politics. Everything I have seen about this show, and I haven't really done a deep dive, so this is not my full discovered analysis, but it does sort of passingly offend me. The way that they engage with social media does also. I find the fan base of the show to be, at best, a little off-putting, at worst maybe even a little bit toxic, and I just don't think it's for me. I also don't know that it feels particularly politically responsible in the current moment, and I don't want to suggest artistic censorship or to stifle anyone's freedom of expression, but I think a show like this that seems to be punching in every which direction is, on some of those occasions, going to find itself punching down, which is not something that we ever like to see. Then we have, why was I going to call this Romeo and Michelle's Big Fat Greek Wedding? Wrong film. Romeo and Michelle's High School Reunion, the musical, starring Laura Bell Bundy and Cara Lindsay, who are two of the reasons why I would want to go and see this show, but I find myself enjoying less and less the musical adaptations of films that I hadn't seen in the first place. I don't know that I would necessarily enjoy this all that much more than I enjoyed Clueless in the West End, which was not very much. I think I dare say that it would be elevated by the performances of its talented cast members. I'm not hearing anything about performances so far that's making me particularly eager to go and see the show. What I've heard of the music isn't necessarily thrilling me, and I just think without any sense of nostalgia for the movie, it's really not going to mean a lot to me. Next up is one that was on my list, and then I sort of reconsidered, which is The Seat of Our Pants. And this is based on a Thornton Wilder play called The Skin of Our Teeth. And it's being produced at the Public Theatre. Lee Silverman is directing. It's got a really fantastic cast. I'm hearing sort of tepid things, but I would caution you against taking what I am hearing from a small handful of people as my final word on the show. I just don't know that I have enough enthusiasm about it to need to go and see it. I'm also not familiar with the source material, and so that would feel like I was doing kind of like a half a job as a critic anyhow. Which brings us to 3 productions that I'm not seeing, largely because I have seen them before. One of them is Kyoto, Off-Broadway, and when this was first announced, I think I shrieked aloud at a event and slightly startled the people around me. This is being produced off-Broadway at Lincoln Centre's off-Broadway space. I loved Kyoto so much in London. I am desperate to get the chance to see it again, but I don't think that is going to be during this particular trip. So I hope it has a future life, maybe a Broadway transfer. If nothing else, I need to go back and make sure I actually get a lanyard this time, because foolishly I managed not to when I went to go and see a press night performance. But I thought it was a really extraordinary and vital play, one that I really need to get the opportunity to go and see again, but that I probably don't need to go and see in New York. That's sort of how I feel as well about The Baker's Wife, and it does have an entirely new cast with some huge names in there. Ariana DeBose playing the Baker's Wife herself, Genevieve. Also Judy Kuhn, who I have seen on stage before in Fiddler on the Roof, but who is always a treat. And it's a lovely production. I know that it's a lovely production because I saw the same production at the Menier Chocolate Factory in London, and I thought it was as delightful, as warm, as charming a staging of The Baker's Wife as you will ever get, what is still inherently sort of sepia and slightly dusty material. I would gladly go back to the show if it weren't such a busy time off-Broadway with so many other exciting new things that I haven't seen before. And I think it's not really vital enough material to get me there. I'm also really impatient now for Ariana DeBose to be cast in some sort of a star vehicle that allows her to dance up a storm. I think she's a fantastic singer and actress, but she is also a remarkable dancer. And there's so many shows from yesteryear that don't often get produced or revived because we don't have a lot of star name triple threats that could sell them, like the Cheetah Riveras and the Gwen Verdons of decades past. Now we do in Ariana DeBose. Where is the Kiss of the Spider-Woman revival? Where is the Sweet Charity revival? And all the rest. Finally, and this one hurts, and I reserve the right to change my mind, but at this time, I don't think I am going to get to go and see Jane Krakowski in Oh Mary. I know! When I was first compiling the list, this, along with Ragtime and Two Strangers, was one of the first shows that I was like, perfect, we'll be in town at the same time as that's happening. And I've seen Oh Mary now a few times. I've seen it twice on Broadway, once off Broadway. I've seen Calder Scola and Titus Burgess as Mary Todd Lincoln. I am looking forward to the London transfer, which is opening next month with my good friend Mason Alexander Park, starring as Mary Todd, who I think is going to be sensational. Can't wait for that. Can't wait to experience it with a West End audience. So intrigued about how that goes down. But it's for that very reason that I think I need to wean myself off of Oh Mary just a little bit so that I'm not entirely desensitized to its wacky charm. I think if I were to go and see Jane a few weeks before I see Mason, then it might be a little bit of a disservice to my reaction to the West End arrival, if that makes sense. It's also a little bit easier to make that decision because Oh Mary no longer does a Thursday 5 p.m. performance for the weeks that I'm going to be in town for whatever reason. And I refuse to try and rush it on a Sunday because that would mean getting there super early and then having to wait until the box office opens at midday, which is horrible. And the pain of this decision is mitigated somewhat by the fact that I've seen Jane Krakowski on stage already this year. I have seen Oh Mary before. I will see it soon again. And I haven't thus far seen every single Mary Todd replacement. It's like the whole Pokemon gotta catch 'em all thing, where you inherently were never going to be able to catch them all because you had to choose one of 3 starter Pokemon and the rest didn't appear throughout the duration of the game. I've gone down something of a tangent, but I'm not going to see Jane Krakowski in Oh Mary, and I need a little bit of emotional support for that, but I'll be fine. Which brings us to the end of my plans for my upcoming return to Broadway. At the time that you're seeing this, perhaps I'm already on a plane, perhaps I'm already in Manhattan, perhaps I've already seen some theatre. Stay tuned for vlog coverage, hopefully for interviews, for opening night carpet coverage maybe, and of course for many reviews of the shows that I will be seeing while I'm there, some of which will be here on YouTube or on podcast platforms, others of which will be short form content shared as YouTube Shorts, but also on Instagram and TikTok. Follow me at all of those places so you don't miss my thoughts about everything that I see in New York. And before you do, make sure to comment down below on this video letting me know which shows over the next couple of months you are the most excited to see or hear about. Finally, and this is entirely up to you, if you would like to use the super thanks button somewhere below this video ahead of all of my Broadway coverage to help contribute to the Schmackery's Cookie Fund, that would be entirely welcome. But regardless of whether or not you do, I will still be eating lots of Schmackeries. That much we know. Plays and musicals I may have to choose between, but delicious sweet treats are a must. In the meantime, thank you so much for listening to this. Stay tuned for plenty of Broadway content, and in the meantime, as always, I hope that everyone is staying safe and that you have a stagey day. For 10 more seconds, I'm Mickey Joe Theatre. Oh my god, hey. Thanks for watching, have a stagey day. Subscribe!